Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pagey here, once again with another video on Legends of Tomorrow Season 3. And this is going to be my review for Episode 7, otherwise entitled Welcome to the Jungle.
I always wanted to go to Vietnam.
I thought we were looking for a monster.
Stay out of the jungle.
I hate the jungle.
One nation under Grodd!
Grodd is a telepathic gorilla.
Welcome to my kingdom.
You need to get out of this jungle ASAP.
So last episode of Legends of Tomorrow involved the legends going back to 1930s Hollywood, and really the big thing to talk about from that episode involved Amaya learning that Kawasa was actually her granddaughter. So that's like a slow revelation that we're wondering, okay, when's that like going to be revealed? It finally got revealed last episode. And so that was going to continue on. It's sort of this episode, but it's going to continue on as we move further down the season, because I think Amaya's going to be, or play a big role in this season along with Zari because of the totems. Now we head to 1967 in this episode. To be specific, Vietnam, because we're going to the Vietnam War. And we did have an anachronism this episode, and as we usually do. And this anachronism is quite the big one, because we've got Gorilla Grodd, and he is definitely not in the right time. Now, I did like how this episode started off with Zari explaining her decision on why she put Helen of Troy on Themyscira and didn't return her back to where she was from. And the whole explanation revolves around the fact that, you know, even though she wasn't in this point in time where she usually was, it had no effect on the Trojan War, which in turn has no effect on the timeline. So she could be placed wherever she was. And, you know, Zari's like, well, I'm going to put you somewhere where you're actually going to enjoy being. Now, it sort of does come into play towards the end of this episode, like that decision, but it doesn't actually play out properly. So I think at some point throughout this season, if not right towards the end of the season, something along those lines or something similar to that will happen, and someone's going to be placed somewhere else for either the good of the world or just to make them experience something really bad. And I think that might happen towards the end of the season, because they wouldn't set that up, explain it in the next episode, and then nothing to come of it. But they did sort of hint it at the end of this episode, but nothing came of it because something else happened, which is actually pretty awesome. But we'll talk about that when we get further into the video. Now, in this episode, we actually met Dick Rory, who is, of course, Mick's dad. And Mick was not happy about being in Vietnam because he was wary and a bit, I wouldn't say scared, but just didn't want to interact with his dad because his dad was actually in Vietnam. So that's why Mick was acting a bit grumpier than usual. And Mick's usually pretty grumpy, so you could tell he was, that grumpy level was definitely a bit overboard. But obviously we knew from season 1 of Legends of Tomorrow that Mick actually, killed his dad by burning the house down. So, yeah, and when he explains that to Nate, Nate seems a bit shocked. But of course we all knew that. Some of you might have forgotten, like it's not something I think about all the time, like, oh, Mick's past, how he killed his parents. But when it came into this, I was like, okay, well, I knew that Mick killed his dad we learned that back in season 1 of Legends. So yeah, it was nice to have this in this episode because it gave Mick a bit of a roller coaster of an episode. I did like how Nate gave Mick the code name Officer Schwarzenegger. I thought that was hilarious. Yeah, we're in what do you call it? We're in the Vietnam War. I think it was. I'm pretty sure that was like a nod to Predator. But yeah, that was pretty funny. Another weird part of the episode, which I wasn't expecting, was when we had Stein working with different physicists, like famous physicists from history. So I think we had Isaac Newton, Galileo. I can't remember who the third one was, but there was Isaac Newton, or Sir Isaac Newton, and Galileo, and they were working together to try and figure out the issue with Firestorm. So I thought that was pretty random, but pretty funny at the same time. But obviously, as I said, Gorilla Grodd is in this time period. Gorilla Grodd is in Vietnam, and, well, he's taking control of both the American troops and the Viet Cong troops, and what he's planning to actually do is start World War III. So the anachronism goes from a level 7 or 8, I think it was, up to a 10, because this event was going to start a massive event in World War III. So Grodd definitely had big plans, and they weren't very good. There was no good intentions there. Now, throughout this episode, you could actually start to see Mick almost like regretting his decision because he was learning what his dad was going through. Because Mick, when he killed his parents, young age, he couldn't tell what his dad was going through. And now he could in first hand, experience what his dad was going through and what turned his dad into the person he was when he was growing up. Like, you could tell Mick's dad wasn't a good person. Like, he wasn't a, like, pure blood, like, full-on, like, good person. Like, he wasn't the nicest person in the world. But you could still understand what he had gone through and what led him to becoming this person that Mick despised when he was growing up. So Mick could once again as I said before, start to almost feel for his dad and understand what he was going through. There was that random scene with Jackson, the president. I think that was basically done to stretch time, like just to add some length to the episode, because that scene was sort of drawn out for a bit and it was a bit like, what's going on here? But that president, I think it was President Johnson, I want to say, like he would have been controlled by Grodd and that would have, kick-started World War III. So I guess Jax did save the day in regards to that. But that whole like stepping over the landmine scene, I'm 99.9% sure was just done to stretch out some time in the episode. Because this episode went pretty quick. I was actually surprised when I checked. I was like, oh god, there's only a couple of minutes left in this episode. It went really quickly. And just that scene, I think it was actually that scene I checked the time because it was just stretching out for way too long. Like it was going very slow. One of the more random scenes of the episode was when Grodd was on top of the Wave Rider and actually takes control of Sarah from outside of the Wave Rider. I thought that was pretty funny, and Martin Stein taking her on, thought that was pretty funny. And also, contrast to the beginning of the episode when Stein was beating that the hit doll, what would you call it? And anything with Sarah's basins or sticks. Thought that was pretty funny. And even though you could say that Mick sort of resolves the issues with his dad, it is that scene where Mick's dad's walking off and Mick just gives him a nod and stuff like that. Just, Mick knows what he's done to this future version of his dad, but he's resolved the issues that he had with him in this episode, the older version of himself. So I thought that was nice, but it was good that Mick finally got to punch him. And when I think it was Nate asked him, why'd you do that? He's like, well, I never got to. So I thought that was hilarious. Now, there were a couple of movie references in this episode. I think there was Apocalypse Now, Predator. I think there was a Forrest Gump reference. I want to say there was. And there was a couple of music references as well. But yeah, I was expecting that. I think in my trailer breakdown for this episode, I did say there should be some references in this episode to some classic movies and even songs. Disappointed they didn't play any songs. Bit disappointed there. Come on, Legends, you played some classic songs recently. Could have squeezed one to this episode, and maybe the royalties were a bit too much, so maybe that's why they avoided it. But yeah, we had a couple of references, which is not too, Legends always does it, so we should be used to them being in there. But the big part of this episode was right at the end. Now, going into this season, they did say that Grodd was going to be on a team with Damien Dark and Kawasa, and I thought, okay, well, maybe they've changed their minds, because Gorilla Grodd can be a bit expensive to do, so maybe they just thought, we'll chuck him in this episode where it fits. And I thought Gorilla Grodd had actually burned to death when he fell into the napalm. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? We're just seeing Gorilla Grodd fall into napalm. But luckily, he was actually brought into present day. Now, as I said, pre-season, they said he was going to be on this team. And I thought they might have changed their mind due to budgetary reasons, had him in this episode where he fit. But no, at the end of this episode, he drops into present day. And guess who's there? It's Damien Dark with one of those time-traveling stones. Some people are still questioning about them. I did explain that near the last episode's review or the episode review before that. They're just basically time travel stones. It's how they're getting back and forth through time. So it's a pretty easy thing to explain. They might actually explain how the stone works, or it could just be some magical sort of thing. But that's how they're traveling through time. We've seen Kawasa use one. I think we saw Eleanor Dark use one. And we've seen Damien Dark use one as well. So they're just time travel stones, I guess. But we actually see Damien Dark recruit Grodd. Now, I think it's going to be hard for Grodd, not to, feel the need to, control them. But because of all this supernatural stuff with Malice, I think Grodd might not do that. But it could also make Grodd even more powerful. I'm sort of scared to see what Grodd is like under the power of Malice. Because we've seen Eleanor Dark get controlled by Malice, or possessed, what do you want to call it. Kawasa's pretty overpowered. Damien Dark, we know, is overpowered. So Grodd's already sort of overpowered, so imagine under Malice what Grodd's power level will be like. So the Legends, I don't know how they're going to do this. I think if the Legends were just versing Damien Dark with his powers, it would be hard enough. Now they got Kawasa, the water person. Eleanor Dark, who's essentially got her dad's powers, just maybe not as strong. And then Malice is possessing her half the time. Damien Dark himself, now we've got Grodd with the potential of being even more powerful through Malice. So what the hell? I don't know how the Legends are going to do this. We've got the crossover next week for all the shows, so we're not going to find out then. I'm excited for the mid-season finale. I think it's Vikings and Constantine is in the next episode of Legends, so be excited for that. It's going to be crazy, but yeah, as I said, just going to be absolutely insane. And Legends, once again, continues just to be very impressive. I thought this was actually probably one of the worst episodes of the season, but still really enjoyable. It was definitely one of the worst ones, but still very enjoyable. And I still had a very good time, and just sets up some stuff getting tongue-tied because it's Legends, but yeah, it just sets up some stuff for later on down the track, especially introducing Grodd, because I wasn't expecting Grodd to actually join this team. I thought they might have just avoided him. But thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, it would be awesome if you could drop a like in the video to show your support for the Legends videos, and if you just enjoyed the episode and the video as a whole, just leave a like. Obviously, let me know in the comment section down below, what did you like about this episode? What didn't you like too much? As I said, I thought it wasn't like the best episode this season, but it was still very enjoyable. So yeah, just leave your opinions in the comments. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. I'll catch you later, guys. Goodbye.